Welcome. Thank you for tuning in and for coming. Um, we are really grateful to all of you who have sent some questions for some of these talks because we really then get a little bit of a pulse on what it is you might be interested in. And Steve, thank you for your question. We are This is one that he said that he was looking through a Dharma book and he found this question and it piqued his interest and he thought maybe it would be a good question for one of these talks, which we agree with. And it's interesting. So the question is a fourfold question, and it is what can help us advance in daily life and in yoga? What can cause us to regress in daily life and yoga? What can help us advance in daily life but not in yoga? And what can help us advance in yoga but not in daily life? And so we got the question a little while ago and thought, oh, this is great. Let's think about this. And then it's one of those kinds of questions where if you think about it too long, your brain short circuits because there are many levels to consider when you consider something like this. Not only like what can help or hinder us, but what are these things that we're talking about? And so the first level that you might look at is just sort of the surface level, like what could help us in our asana practice or our pranayama practice. So it's sort of like the practical surface level. And then you pause with that, and then you look deeper, and then you start saying what can, when you're saying not help us, but you're saying what can make us help us advance, then it sort of starts to take on this twist where it's like, what does it mean to advance? What are you talking about when you think about advancement in yoga or in life? I mean, Richard and I, as we get older, we have a different definition for
Of advance.
advancing.
It's automatic.
It's automatic, but there are other kinds of advancement that happen as well. And so, really, truly, what does that mean? And then you look again, which is what we're always telling everyone to do.
Look again.
Look again, and you go to a deeper level, and it's then you really have to say, what is yoga? What is advancing? And you go deeper still, and you say, who are you, and who is advancing, and that what does that mean? And it sort of stimulates the question: is yoga part of life, or is it separate from life? And does how does a separation of the two impact all of us within our practice, or the joining together of them? So when we were thinking of it, that sort of was, oh, this is an easy one, and then you start feeling slightly nauseated because it's not. And it made us think a little bit about one sort of natural tendency of the human mind, which is to sort things into categories like this, and then to try to make them more explicable. And any of you who've read Buddhist texts and a number of the yogic texts have probably noticed the number of times and number of places within those texts that things are enumerated. You have the 5 kleshas, and you have the 10 this and the 25 that. And Sankhya was big on that, I think.
Yeah, the word Sankhya means to enumerate.
Yeah.
And so they started the lists a long time ago.
Yeah, because they thought of this
And
very
they keep
question.
updating them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the nature of mind is to break things into categories like
And-
that. And then,
To put them back together.
yeah,
So there's the a kind of famous word, vikalpa, means kal is to imagine, which I imagine that most of you are imagining stuff most of the time anyway. At least I imagine that. And so kal, but vikal means to divide it into little sections, which, because you want to put everything into a category, so you're looking, even we do that with other beings, and with nature. And then, but then the flip side of that is sankalpa, which means put it back together. How do these things that are now here, how do they all connect with each other again? And so that's the process of mind. And so that's in Yoga Sutra. I think of the categories of the chitta vrittis, those things that we're going to bring into nirodha or suspension. So we choose a category, a definition for that. It's the third one, and it's really describing, saying that whatever this is, sankalpa, vikalpa, it's really composes, so much of our experience. And it can be divided, it can be put back together. And
it helps us, in terms of when we think of advancement in yoga, sometimes we are thinking in terms of, am I going to become enlightened? Or where am I going to find samadhi? And vikalpa and sankalpa play a role in that a little bit.
Yeah, and then we find that, and they even define the different types of samadhis in relation basically to the vehicle that you were in when you kind of slid out of the vehicle, usually accidentally, into like, wow, this is absolutely awesome, or it's awfully amazing, or it's so deep in the heart. But we define the almost by the vehicle, and the vehicle is often, it's different levels of sankalpa and vikalpa occurring in relation to others. And so sometimes many of us live in a way where we don't really relate to the actual world outside of us. And that's one of the paths that is an unfortunate one in yoga, where we hear, oh, it's all just an illusion, it's all impermanence, which it is in some sense. And therefore, you can just ignore, and you don't have to worry about categorizing. And there are certain people we know, and we've met a few of them, on the streets, who have that view of what yoga is. So yoga is basically just forget the whole thing, and so that is an interpretive system. And then the actual traditions that have survived usually recommend in their practice things to do that will allow you to see your mind doing that. Mm-hmm. And you'll see, and it'll make you start to question. And so then you can eventually go deeper. And so much of the Yoga Sutra is you create a vehicle which helps you focus your mind. And it could be anything from, a holy place or a holy mantra, or, even, smelling something wonderful, or it just helps you focus. And you say, that is sacred, that is wonderful. And you focus on it. And then as you focus, all of a sudden, if your focus is good, you start to see, it's much deeper. You start to actually stumble into the feeling or the embodiment of your focus, where you start to say, oh, there's more to this. And then at a certain point, you briefly let go of it. And then oftentimes then you're busy trying to regain that experience. And so for some people, just the experience of yoga as an escape, I want to re-experience escaping from everything, or I want to re-experience feeling this or that. And then if you keep practicing and practicing, eventually you can start to see, oh, let me look again.
Yeah.
Let me look again.
And it seems that one of the, let me just admit here, one of the important ways that people, one of the important tools we all have is the awakened embodied experience. And we've talked about this a little bit in some of the other talks. And to, when you're considering advancing in life or in yoga and how those two things interface, it's interesting to consider that from the direct experience that you're having as an embodied sentient being, and what, you know, that is this experience of the mystery of life, so that and the magic of life and the difficulties of life. And it's almost as though the embodied experience is this tool that we have to help us to navigate in this field between, you know, the craziness and the chatter and the ongoing confusion and the ongoing insights that we might have within the mind. Our bodies become this tool that help us to regulate and see if we are indeed interfacing well with our surroundings, with others. Because the embodied experience is far more than just, you know, going to the gym and working out or doing an asana practice or doing a pranayama practice. The embodiment has the levels within it of the physical body, you know, everything from the bones and the muscles and the viscera and all of that, to the next level, which really in a sense is the breath that's there sort of as part of this makeup.
Yeah.
And then
The next level of the breath is then sensation. Because when you feel your breath, actually it's just, you know, initially, oh, I feel it mostly in my nose, a little bit in the lungs, but then that spreads, and all of a sudden, throughout your whole body, when you breathe, you're feeling sensation. And so beginning with touch, and then sound, and sight, and then taste and smell, and then it actually might even go more subtle than that. That would then be defined as breath, and embodiment is feeling the patterning of the breath without leaping or then the immediate associated story. Because every story you have, according to the theories of these teachers, every story you have, even if it's a silly little short story, there's a sensation pattern that comes with it.
yeah, it's sort of been encoded.
Encoded.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can feel that yourself. And part of yoga is just to discover that by deliberately thinking of something wonderful. You know, like little ducklings in a pond, or, you know, puppies or kittens, or all types of variety of humans or other beings. And then noticing the breath, and how that breath as sensation, the whole pattern through the entire body.
And then, as we're talking about stilling the mind and settling into, stabilizing the mind and setting into stillness in a fully embodied way, then you have deeper levels of awareness of these sensations of breath. And it starts to become evident that the breath is sort of the go-between between this physical chunk or thing that you're walking around in, and that you feel you're interfacing with the world with. And it interfaces between that and what you might call the heart, where your intelligence, your sense of beauty, your sense of ethics and meaning, where they're the intuitive parts of you that you can't put words on really, but they exist as sensation patterns. In a sense, they exist as prana or breath within the heart area. And then, as Richard's saying, again, the mind then also relates to the breath. So that as you are practicing, whether you're doing asana or meditation or pranayama or chanting or whatever you're doing, just walking through the world, the breath is always there as this go-between from between your body and your interfacing in the world and your more internal experience that is this intuitive, beautiful sense of your essence, the real expression of who you are in the heart, as well as the Sankalpa Vikalpa system that you've got running in your brain that is sometimes wonderful and sometimes not so wonderful.
Sometimes hurts.
Yeah, sometimes hurts.
Excuse me.
Yeah. And so,
I just thought of something. That's,
Oh.
that's my bodily
Yeah.
reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what we then tend to do is we would then go, now I understand everything. I'm going to worship the breath. And you become is it word breatharian? Yeah, that used to be a cult that I knew somebody. Truly.
Well, I know,
Yeah.
but they didn't really worship the breath. They worshipped not
Themselves, yeah.
eating, yeah,
Yeah.
not eating food and being nurtured by the breath and nourished by the breath,
Yeah.
which then you'd
And-
see them at the 7-Eleven at midnight with the Haagen-Dazs ice cream bar in their hands.
That's another talk coming. And so then we have to, in relation to an important part of practice that keeps us from becoming imbalanced, in which we are using yoga as a way of pulling away from what we believe to be the horrible truth of impermanence, so I'm going to escape into nirvana or something. Or the opposite, where you see, well, yoga is merely an escape, and so I'm going to get out there and do good things in the world for everybody, which, sometimes that's a very good thought for yoga practitioners. We have to look at our definitions, because the mind then makes a religion out of breath. It makes a religion out of sensation. It makes a religion out of everything. And if we can stay connected with the greater community, and so of yoga practitioners, which for me has been, I have to keep expanding my vision, my definition of yoga practitioners, extremely wide, beyond the human species for sure. And that sense of connection keeps, as you were talking about, the heart,
Yeah.
and then the breath, and then you automatically see that your silly mind silly meaning empty in the medieval definition of the term, that is also made out of breath. And by breath, we don't mean the air going in and out, although it includes that. We don't mean just what we think sensations are, although immediately I'm going to go look for some sensations. And because I have a definition, I'm actually ignoring all the sensations that are right in my face, or in my heart, or in my throat, or in my feet or hands. You ignore them because you're out looking for the ideal sensation.
Yeah, and that loops back into helping us to, if you can step back from that and see that process going within yourself, you then start having the tool to look closely at what is it that you are defining as advancement, and what is it that you're defining as yoga. Because we have this tendency to, have sankalpa and vikalpa. We have this capacity within the embodied experience to integrate that sense of meaning that we apply to something. But then as soon as you have decided, as Richard's saying, that yoga is this, and such, like yoga means the asana. Let's keep it simple. As soon as you do that, then everything else is excluded from what yoga is. And the mind latches onto that easily and quickly. And it's through the breath that the mind is allowed to latch on, and in a healthy way, rather than a kind of compulsive or fundamentalist way, so that when you are looking at how am I advancing in yoga, and what are asanas that I'm advancing with, that question sort of arises in you. You start really noticing very subtle shifts in sensation patterns, but also the physical, air, the breath that you are drawing in. For instance, if you are really intense about something, or really ultimately very, very defined in a certain way, notice that, and notice what physical experience you're having through the breath. Is the throat more constricted? Is the breath shallow or deep?
Yeah, I've been doing asanas. Occasionally, practitioners, myself and others I've seen, will have an ideal form that we want to force the body into, and you end up almost explode. The breath gets held or pushed, or it gets extremely loud, and it's like rah, and it's kind of scary,
Yeah.
at least for yourself and others. So that's
And that's
a
when
common thing.
You have the situation that this question proposed of, when an asana practice, or what you have named as a yoga practice, gets in the way or starts to regress advancement in life, is when you are stuck in one particular part of the more integrated embodied experience.
Yeah.
And usually it's in a mind state that you get stuck in.
Yeah, and the fact is that the mind, this is just a particular level it has to categorize, and the manifestation of your theoretical self based on the ego, it's going to have these different layers of mind where it says, I need to get this done right now. That's either off the mat, I need to achieve, immense wealth and power and world domination.
Or I need to get my leg behind my head.
Or I need to get my leg behind my
A
head.
simple wish.
Yeah. I don't know which is more likely.
Yeah, or more dangerous.
Yeah, but the mind, even any mind is going to do that. even the mind of the what we would call in Hindu mythology of the avatars, of the incarnate of the divine beings, if they're manifesting, they manifest using these different levels of conceptuality, but at a certain point, one is aware that they're doing it, and so I'm watching myself, strain to do something, and I'm able to actually see it without being angry at it, just seeing, wow. And seeing it as part of this, and the closer you are, or the more practiced with the embodied experience, you feel it as this amazing, awesome thing that, that at moments you're not identifying with even the ego function, or the silliness of the mind too, or the profound levels of the mind, where occasionally we start to really understand, the complexity and the mathematical beauty of interdependence, and we are totally awestruck. And then, of course, then you think, oh, I'm really advancing now.
Yeah.
And
that's the moment it stops.
the moment it stops. Or
Yeah.
if you're aware that you see your mind come in and say, wow, now I'm finally enlightened. But if you're seeing it, then there's not the identification with it. And you also experience it as a very impermanent state.
And so back to the question where we were sort of chewing over the idea of what can help with advancement in yoga and in life, or in yoga but not in life. Part of what and I are just talking about here is that as we continue with practices, and as we allow there to be stillness in the body and the heart and the mind, that there is this natural thing that happens where the boundary between who you are and nature, what nature is, that starts to dissolve. And not in a frightening way, not like some terrifying thing that is a nightmare, or some sort of hallucinogenic trip that sends you to an ER, but in a way where you really do feel this this lack of distinction between yoga, which is this joining together, and life, which is this incredible thing that we have found ourselves embodied in. And so that the question really is contingent on being able to see yourself at times when you pull yoga and life apart in your mind. You cannot actually literally pull them apart, like many things. But when in our mind, where it's like, I'm going to go do my yoga now and then I'm going to do everything else, that's when you start to sort of have hindrances that arise and confusion that arises.
But it's a good idea to go do your yoga.
Yeah, but
for most of the time, the practice is very helpful.
yeah, but then I remember years ago when you taking a class with you, and you said, the thing many people have heard you say, which is, practice yoga all day, every day, all night, every night. And I remember I was working at this high stress job and coming back to my desk and thinking, that is so funny. He's such a funny teacher, haha. And then, what a good joke. And then, years later, realizing that my mind had limited what I was defining as yoga.
Yeah.
To the point that then that becomes, a sort of threshold you can't pass over in terms of, quote unquote, advancement. So advancement really is something that is simplifying, and what many people might consider not advancing, but
Right.
releasing and sort of really merging with the subject and with life. And so, in terms of the yoga practices, when you pull that back a little bit to look at the more superficial level, like the surface level of practical asana that we're talking about, this same sort of level of release, tyag, when you can do that as you try some of the more extreme postures or run into a stumbling block where your arm got broken and you can't use it.
Right, working with sickness or injury.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that becomes this same equivalent or an equivalent to this idea of merging within the fully awakened embodied state, merging with nature, merging with life, and it's really a matter of calming the mind down. At least for me, so much of it is trying to get the mind to settle, so that I can not have concepts like advancement, because when you set things up like advancement, you are setting up comparisons between this is advanced and this is not. And when you set those up, you tend to perpetuate suffering. Because as soon as you have advanced, then you have to advance more. Or then you slide back. Or then you're better than someone else and you have to compare yourself. And so when the mind can soften, knowing that it has this capacity for sorting things out and putting them back together, and knowing that that's a process rather than a final assembly of something, that's when it seems that
It
quote
feels
unquote
good. It
advancement
works. Yeah.
is happening.
And I like the idea of everything you're doing throughout the day is a practice, is yoga practice. Even though sometimes we do have to, and all of us have to do very practical things throughout the day, just for the body, if not, and and that all of these, in a sense, are a practice of yoga. And then, even as your mind, starts to think, yes, now that I've discovered the secret of advancement is always again this, as you say, softening the mind or looking again. It's just that level of intelligence where you're just like pausing and giving space to, all of these, even the silly natures of mind in general. It doesn't have to be. So if you do it for your own mind, you're doing it for everybody else's mind, which really helps you become more compassionate, patient, or it helps you become more effective in doing what needs to be done in relation to other beings and in relation to the environment. And, so that looking again or asking.
Yeah, we were talking about earlier when we were sort of thinking about what we might discuss, that there are characters in mythology, in Indian mythology, who take these they're really like urges and sort of sort of the way the human mind works, and they have taken them and become fanatics about them. And they're like Ravana you were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Ravana was the 10-headed yogi who was taking over the entire universe, who lived on Sri Lanka. Okay. Some of the
He thought
there's
he
still
was
residue, politically from Ravana's day, even happening now. But he was a complete master of Sanskrit, the holy language, and I'm sure his yoga asanas were good, particularly with, when he did a headstand, it was
Yeah.
a different thing.
Oh, he
And,
had a lot of footing
yeah.
with 10 heads.
Anyway, and so he's in the Ramayana of the story of Rama, and he was taking over the universe, but then he became kind of very desirous of Sita, which was the beloved of Rama, and Sita had no, of course, interest in that, and so he basically, the story, there are many different versions of the story, but he was the one, he kidnapped Sita, and then Hanuman, who's almost the symbol of natural embodiment. One, he has the advantage of not being a human.
It's a big advantage.
But his father was, one of the gods, and so he has the infinitely long tail, and the inhaling breath of the heart, huge. So he's always shown ripping open his heart. Look, and at the same time he has the power of the apana, which is the serpent power, that which drains down into the earth, the water, and those are represented this way by the back of the diaphragm. And so he is just natural. And if you've ever gotten, monkeys can be interesting teachers. You got to be careful with certain varieties. But like many creatures out in nature, they can inform you of a lot of stuff. And so there's a natural embodied being. And he was able to take care of Ravana. And of course, Ravana is in mythology, you have to realize that we are both Rama, Sita, and Ravana, and Hanuman. And then you think, oh yeah, that's me. But who is that? And so what the joy is just in the pure awareness that is this. If you say what it is, then you have to go through a whole process to then sacrifice what you said it is.
And so these mythological characters, or the idea of visualizations that we often use, those are ways to remind us of these inherent aspects of what it means to be human, what it means to to have the desire to know, am I advancing? Am I regressing? Am I more powerful or less powerful than another? And if you look at those two in particular, Ravana and Hanuman, they're almost like these counterbalances to one another, where Hanuman was so in love with the world through his love for his beloved teachers and Rama and Sita, that he himself kind of was completely grounded by his aponic aspect, and he sort of disappeared in his own awareness, whereas Ravana was the star of his show. And so these the mythology, whether it's Greek mythology or Indian mythology or any kind, they're designed to really show us that these are the natural, inherent human traits, the human condition. And if the archetypes if in a way, that we all have, the potential to embody, and embody gracefully, in which case, as this question we keep coming back to is, what gives advancement in yoga and life is when you embody things in an integrated way, so that you see these aspects of mind, you feel the, depth of the sense of joy and truth and meaning that is alive in the world and alive in you, and you feel the connection through the physical body and breath to the earth, that's when, real advancement starts to happen.
And you're open to feedback.
Yeah.
Even though you've invested so much into your lifetimes of practice and like Ravana, you've invested all of that, but you're open to feedback, somebody saying, oh, maybe you should look again. Maybe
Exactly.
you should start over from zero, from the present moment. And because it was interesting, because Hanuman went to visit Ravana, because Ravana was a head of state, like very important, like some current day politicians, and very formal, in terms of all the rules. And if you went to see him, like, a typical Asian autocrat, you had to sit on the ground below him, and he was sitting on a throne, and was quite regal. And so Hanuman actually went and just sat on the ground in front of him. But Hanuman had a tail called Nagaraj, who was the tail, the serpent of infinity. And so Hanuman just sat there, and his tail started growing and spinning. Kundalini. And so Hanuman just went, woo, and all of a sudden, he was way, way, way above Ravana. And then he jumped up, and he started to get in trouble, because that's when Ravana started to attack him. How dare he sit on a seat that's higher than me?
But he had a mission.
But he had.
Yeah.
But it's nice. The thing about the embodiment is that you're then open to feedback, and so which helps, because there's a lot to learn. It's just like I've met a lot of people here who are, looking at the complexity of the environmental situation, and but it's a very complex problem, and it's easy to think, oh, this is the solution, but given the world situation and the way people behave, we still got to keep looking and keep upgrading our communication skills and ideas in order to get everybody to work on it together.
And that's, really what helps to advance in yoga and life. And the opposite, obviously, which, what causes regression, what you might say, or sort of devolution in life and in yoga, is when you don't do that, when you let things get out of hand, and you either become infatuated with yourself or infatuated with an idea. And then, really looking at what could make you more advanced in yoga and less advanced in life, that part of the question is really sort of looking at the two as being separate. And so in a way, that one, from our perspective, might be one that is less interesting to look at, because if one is really, truly advancing, meaning getting more real, getting more authentic, more depth, then they can't be separate. two ends of the same stick or two parts of the same picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, yeah, and we hope we put some light on some of that, and also, encourage you to think about it and think about, whether those things that we say sit with you well or not, and if they don't, or if they do, always feel free to be in touch and say, hey, I didn't understand this, or could you elaborate more about that, or never talk about that again. We won't take it personally. But we wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts, just in terms of the practicality of this idea of advancement. And one is, to take time, and it doesn't have to be a lot of time, just a pause, just a breath or two, to really consider what it is you mean by the idea of advancement, or what others might mean by advancement. So to really define that, like what does that mean? And then to consider how that plays out in the way you are in the world, the way you are in your yoga. So, there could be maybe 4 things that you could contemplate in terms of your daily engagement with the world and with yoga. And one would be to really think about, in terms of advancement, am I feeling happier? Am I behaving in ways that are nicer and more compassionate to other beings? Am I feeling more like part of this whole, or more separate? Am I feeling that I am separate or special or unique? And that's one sort of level of contemplation, just in terms of a daily thing to contemplate, and to look at these questions almost like with incredible sense of sort of really being truthful with yourself, because you're the only one who really knows the answers. Like if you're happier and if you're nicer, on a authentic, deep level. And another one that we came up with was, am I better at showing up? In other words, being present, better at listening, better at not drawing conclusions immediately, but observing. So in terms of advancement, if you are able to stay open and really listen, really show up for the moment, you don't have to worry about whether you're advancing, because you're in the moment. Who's going anywhere? It's just you there at that point. And do you want to, am I more clear,
Oh,
precise?
yeah. Precise in saying that which cannot be said, but we try anyway.
Yeah,
It's almost like, I'm just saying, it's so hard to explain what is beyond words, using words, but that is art.
yeah,
And somehow, you always come across some brilliant way that it's expressed, in mythology, stories, poetry, cooking.
Yeah.
And
and other language, like just the way
Yeah.
you are. Am I more clear in a way? It's like, am I more real? Am I more authentic?
mhm. Yeah.
And then the last one that we came up with in terms of things that you could really contemplate that might be helpful.
Trusting.
Yeah.
And do you trust? And so this doesn't mean, you should trust the untrustable uh, elements in society and culture. Be careful,
Yeah.
because they want you to. That's called scamming.
Yeah.
But trust is the ability to not know and to yet at the same time love or to feel deeply, that deep connection. And that's the word shraddha in Sanskrit. And so that ability to trust. And trust is really the almost like the gateway, or bad metaphor, I'm not sure, but to the state of samadhi. It's the frame is like, and it allows the suspension of
Yeah.
thought, because I'm trusting. I don't need to know, because I feel this deep connection or love.
Yeah.
And then you also gain then trust in the entire process of the entire process. We'll leave it. We won't define it further than that.
Yeah.
The life process.
So the questions: Are you nicer, happier? Are you showing up? And are you more clear, precise? And are you able to trust? And then to look at those things without judgment. When you say, "Oh shoot, I can't trust it all," then that's okay. To then look at it, because it's far more advanced to recognize that you don't trust than to masquerade as someone who is trusting because you think that you should trust. So the advancement starts to happen automatically when you accept things as they are, and then keep reflecting back with this kind of question that really questions the nature of life and your own essence, and how those things, like life and yoga, those things are merging. And that's where it starts to be interesting. That's where the yoga really starts to do something that you can't describe.
But you try.
But you try anyway, because you're a person. So, yeah.
Should we
Yeah.
turn it over
Yeah.
to?
So we want to thank you
Interest.
for joining us and for listening to this. And we really, as we've done more and more of these talks, as we've gotten more seasoned in life, this kind of self-inquiry that we're talking about is something that has helped us to deepen and our own yoga, and deepen our own relationship, deepen our own relationship to others and to life. So we offer it and invite you to see if it works for you too. So thank you.